What I'm showing you today is how to use the Pantone system with the physical chips in connection with Pantone Connect, the Pantone app that is new as of March 2022 and must be used in order to access the Pantone system. It has previously been integrated into Adobe, but I think because of the expense and Pantone hopping on the subscription bandwagon like Microsoft and Adobe, that they've now made it a required plugin that you have to subscribe to. So I do all of my original master artwork using the solid coated paper or chip system. The original system went only up to 400, and so those are the original. When you see a 3-digit number, you know that it's the original Pantone system, and then they started adding in-between colors, which is fantastic because it only had 300 or 400 colors in the beginning. So imagine that it used to jump from this page to this page, and now we have all of these in-between colors that didn't exist before. So that's the explanation for the 4 digits. And so it goes up to 800 with 3 digits, and then it has thousands of 4 in-between colors. There is an index in the front that makes it easier to find. And so you'll be able to go through here because you might, let's say you're looking for Pantone number 7,355, you might imagine that that's at the back of the book, when in fact it could actually be at the beginning of the book. And so then what you want to do is I like the chip books the best, because then I can pull them out and make various color palettes. And let me show you an example of that. But let's compare that to the uncoated guide. So let me just get to the same page so that you can actually see them side by side. Okay, so for example, I'm going to turn this upside down so you can see it. Well, actually, let me just pull it out. That'll be easier. So you can pull this out, and then you can see how differently the inks look between a coated paper and an uncoated paper. It's the exact same ink, but it changes radically. And so the thing is that there is going to be some variation in your color palettes, because you could design artwork that's in the coated palette and see what it looks pleasant to the eye. But if you're printing on cotton fabric or uncoated matte paper, it's going to be these slightly darker shades. So that's the purpose of the system. So here's my colored notebook. It's very, it's an internal document just for my eyes only usually, so it's kind of scuffed up and old. But in here I have, first on this side, just my favorite colors that I work with all the time, giving myself a range of warm to cool to neutral, and then I've added more muted colors, which I then step from light, medium dark to dark. And that way every color has a good contrast between the tones that I can choose. And then here what I do is I actually bring out a whole bunch of Pantone chips, which I've saved all the extras here. And working on white paper, I can then move them around and see how the contrast, like would a detail of this light color show up. I can put it behind and see how there's enough contrast. And most of my palettes, I do have at least 1 or 2 light colors and then a couple of dark colors and then medium tone. That will give me a good range to put my motifs, usually in the middle values, and then I have a dark color or a light color that I can use for either the background or the details or vice versa. And I do number my palettes, which may or may not be confusing to some people since we're also dealing with numbers here, but it works for me. I'm up to 403 on my color palettes. So here's my most recent color palette, which I've already documented here, and it started with, this is the physical chip version and the physical chip version. This is for a new floral collection that I just did. So you could see I have the lights, as I mentioned, I have the darks, as I mentioned, and then I have, in this case, a range of pinks and a range of blues, a range of oranges, and a range of aquas. That way, when I do the same design in 2 different colorways, I have all the darks and all the lights and all the medium values in the same places. That's important because the clients or factories are usually using the same printing plates when they're doing second and third colorways. And then I document those chips with reusable tape, so I can pull them off easily and reuse them. Now there are other Pantone books. This is metallics. This one's tints. This one is pastels. And so what these have are also spot colors with some really lovely pastels and ivories and really subtle colors that are not part of the regular Pantone system. And then we also have the metallics, which are, as you imagine, gold, silver, copper, etc. But there's actually a huge range of really beautiful metallic colors. And they've also given you what's called a tint guide. So rather than printing the ink at 100%, if you were to print it at 10, 30, 50, 70, or even print a photograph, it shows you what that would look like. So that's the purpose of these books. The tints book shows the entire Pantone system in tints. So if you want to, where the other one was metallic, so any color, any kind of project that you're doing with the original color system, you'll be able to see what it looks like in tint form. And you may not need all these books. I mean, because I'm a graphic designer as well as a service designer, I need to have these books. Here is another one that's quite important to have. This is solid to process. So what happens here is that the book shows you it's a double chip system, so there's no perforation. It's showing you side by side what the spot color looks like and what the CMYK version of that would look like. So a lot of paper products are done with CMYK, like gift wrap and stationery, greeting cards and so on, because it's more efficient. It would be very costly to print, let's say, 15 individual spot colors when they can achieve almost the same result using CMYK, which is a 4-color process. But you can see there's quite a discrepancy in the colors. You're not going to get these really bright pastels, and as you go from light to dark, the matches are much better in the dark and more subtle tones, more muted tones. But sometimes it's just a cost effective way to do printing. Now, a few years ago, actually the first time I used this was in 2010, they introduced a different system called the Pantone Fashion and Home system. And you'll know, now they've gotten so many pages now that there's actually an easy index in the front. Let me get this out of the way. There's actually an index in the front to locate the colors, because it's actually hard to find some of the colors now as there's so many. So if somebody gave you a number like 7355, you might imagine that it's actually in the back of the book, but it's not. It could be in the front. So going by numbers, it'll tell you exactly what page and row that color is on. So what I do is I pull out a whole bunch of chips that I like, and I'll be working with them on paper. I have a stash of chips, which I'll show you off camera. So this is my color notebook. It's just an internal document, so it's not anything fancy. I've had it for years, so it's pretty scuffed up and ugly looking, but I'm usually the only one that gets to see it. And in here, I've chosen color breaks that I like. So I've basically come up with my favorite top 100 colors that I use frequently, and then also I added later more muted colors, and I like to step them so I have light, medium dark to dark within each color range, because then it makes it really easy for me to mix and match. No, I don't limit myself to these colors on everything. It's just that this makes it much easier for me to come up with a color palette, and then I can deviate from there. Then what I do is I take all the chips, and you can see all my leftover chips here. I never throw these away. I have them organized in little mini envelopes by color. So I've got my blues together, my pinks together, my oranges together, and so on. And so I then go and play with them on paper, and I make actual color palettes. Now these were done in the uncoated because they were specifically being done on a bedding project. So it was going to be printed on cotton as quilts, and you see I also number my palettes, which may be confusing to other people because the Pantone also has numbers, but it's been working for me for many years. So I have them both in chip form, and then from there, I then create my color palettes in Illustrator, and I document them. So I actually have from 100 up to 403 at this point. And then side by side, the printout mimics the uncoated more correctly, but that way I can just skim through my notebook when I'm looking for a color palette and see if there's something that I've used in the past that I could use again. So I have, like all blue, all warm and cool, muted. I've even gone in and picked out, for example, my favorite browns or my favorite grays or so on, so that I don't have to do that work again. So it's all documented in here. And then once I have that, I would add this to the end of my binder. So this one's actually already in here. That's a duplicate. And so it's really important to see the color values together, because also within a color palette, I usually need at least a dark color and a light color so that there's a contrast between the elements and the background, or to highlight little details. So you'll see a lot of my palettes will have that. And then from there, I, of course, enter it into the computer, and then I can replicate that on a various surface design. I do want to show you too that there are other books. There is a different system that Pantone introduced. I think the first time I had to use it was about in 2010, and at that time we actually had to buy a CD and a fan deck in order to pick those colors. So this is called the Fashion and Home Color Guide, and it also comes in both a coded and uncoded version. So the thing is, and so you'll know that it's the Fashion and Home Guide because it has a 6-digit number. They start with 13 through 19, a hyphen, and then a 4-digit code, followed by TPX or TCX, P standing for paper and C standing for cotton. So this range has more subtle and in-between colors, but it's unfortunately not keyed to the original system. So you have two different systems that you need to work with within Pantone Connect. And I only get about, I would say 80% of my clients and factories still work from the original system. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still the standard for the graphics industry and printing industry. It's just that now that this 6-digit has come in, that certain clients that I'm working with, for example, mostly fabric by the yard or bedding or shower curtains or sometimes fashion, will request the fashion system. There's also a Pantone Metallics, and you might not use this that often in surface design, but I do, because I do a lot of paper and stationery. So it's got all these incredibly beautiful metallic colors, and then it shows you what a photograph and what tints would be of that. That's where you take a solid color and only print a certain percentage of it. So let me just pull this out for a second. So for example, if I were to spec this coded copper color, on the chip it shows me also what it looks like normally, which is also shiny and coated, but also adding a layer of varnish, which is an extra shiny coating for protection and also enhances the color. And so you can see there's a slight difference. And if I were to use that metallic color, a 10% of the full strength, this being 100%, 30, 50, 70, so I get an idea of what various tints would look like and also what photographs would look like using this system. The next thing I have is what's called a pastel system. So this is the Pantone Pastel, because neither of the systems have great pastels. So this is really great if you're doing something in very specific pastel colors. It's got lovely colors. The original system doesn't have the super light colors. And then I also have what's called the solid to process chip. So this is going to show me what it looks like side by side if I'm printing the spot color, which means the ink is actually mixed to this specific color, and what the CMYK version would look like. That's where they're using magenta, cyan, which is blue, magenta, which is the red, yellow, and then black, CMYK, K standing for black, and what that would actually look like side by side. And you can see there's a pretty big discrepancy. But sometimes you're printing in CMYK for cost savings, because the spot colors can be quite expensive. So, you know, rather than doing 15 spot colors, they can get the same job done with 4 colors using CMYK. But you can see there's a big discrepancy, particularly in pastels. As you get into the darker and more subtle tones, it's a better match. You can see this is a well-worn guide that I've used over the years. Very helpful. And again, I have my little pocket that came with the book for saving all the chips when I'm working on color palettes. And then lastly, I have, if you are printing tints of your colors. So the other one was metallics. This is a tint selector for all of the original Pantone colors, all the formula guide. And so what this shows me is 10 all the way through 80% of any given Pantone number, and also what a photograph would look like printed in that ink color. Now for surface designers, I've been a graphic designer for many years, so I need all of these books. And I would say that my this book and the series that I just showed you, I've had these for at least 15 years. And you can see how many chips I've torn out of these. I only recently got a new set of books because I literally had run out of chips of colors that I use frequently. And also when it gets older, it starts to fade, the paper starts to yellow, and so on. So definitely keep it out of the sun in like an enclosed cabinet or something like that. So my other point of this part of the demo too is that the reason I'm a big fan of the chip books is because if you're picking a color palette, let's say has anywhere from 6 to 15 colors, it's very, very difficult to work with a Fandex and try to imagine what all your colors look like. You end up just completely bending your pages, and you really don't get to see what the chips look like side by side. And when I'm working with my color palettes like this, I can literally take something like, and I use a removable tape so it doesn't ruin the chips, and I can see, you know, side by side, is there enough contrast? Is there enough contrast? You know, like let's say this is the background, and I want to make sure that a small element like a line will work on this. And so I can move all my chips around. And the other thing I do when I'm doing my color palettes is I keep them in the same sequence that I want. So for example, these two are going to be background colors, and the two lightest color are going to be accent colors. And then I have corresponding dark to dark, light to light. And then I make sure, like this is a range of 3 hot pinks, and then I substitute 3 blues in by color variation. And this has 2 shades of orange, and I've substituted 2 aquas. And that way not only will my client be able to use the same printing plates as they do different color variations, but it makes my color choices make sense and look good in the final result. So the last part I'm going to show you here is working with the Pantone Fashion and Home system, which the first time I used this was in 2010. So these date back to that period. And at that time you actually had to use a CD to install it as a plugin for Adobe Illustrator and Illustrator and Photoshop. And even up until they discontinued Pantone, they didn't have this system as part of the Adobe software. And so you can see it has a lot of subtle, more in-between colors. You know that it's the Pantone Home and Fashion if it has a 6-digit number. They start with 11 up through 19, and then a hyphen, and then a 4-digit, and then TPX stands for P for paper, and TCX, C for cotton. And these have absolutely no correlation with the original system. It's not like the 4 digits match that one or not. You actually need to cross-reference them using the Pantone Connect app. And so the other reason I like I wanted to show you this too, even though it's old, is that it's very difficult to pick a color palette with a Fandex. That's what this thing is called. If you're trying to pick 7 or 8 colors and see what they look like side by side, it's really, really difficult. You're going to end up just bending your pages and, you know, really having a hard time. I think that you can see the value of having individual chips the value of having individual chips that I can move around and change my mind and all of that. I don't tape them down till I'm completely finished. I mean, it's literally, I will have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of chips on my white table, good natural lighting, and then once I have it, I've completed my, I'm happy with my color palette, then I actually document it with the actual chips, and then I document it into an Illustrator document. And then if I'm working on a fabric or bedding project that requires the fashion and home system, I have all my master art in the original system, and then I do a cross-reference over to those colors. And as I mentioned, I really only need the fashion and home system about 20% of the time. So that's why I stick with the original system for all of my master art. On occasion, some of my clients request using the TCX cotton or the TPX. This is a system that came out a number of years later after the original system, and they're both prominent. You can tell that you have the original formula guide colors if they're 3 digits or 4 digits, followed by either a C for coated or a U for uncoated. I don't get that many requests for the uncoated, but I have room on my template if I need to do it. So I'm going to actually turn these all into U's. I had just copied and pasted from above. Let's make these all U's, and then I'll show you how to get the other colors. Okay, so we have, potentially I would be filling this in with uncoated. Right now we're going to do the uncoated. I'm sorry, the TCX. So this is happens to be for a fashion company. I use these, most of the clients that ask for these are either in fashion or they're fabric by the yard or bedding, types of industries where they still print in spot colors, so that the colors are actually the most brilliant. And so you go to your extension Pantone Connect, and then we're going to do what's called a cross-reference. So we are going to first see, let's put in a number. We're just going to put in our first Pantone number, which is 7651. And what we're going to do is say cross-reference. So it's, let me just bring my document down a tiny bit. So we're converting the spot color to the TCX system. So it's going to show us right here what's the best match. I need to switch the book now. I need to go to the TCX book. So it's telling me that this number is the best match. So I'm going to say add to swatch. I'm also going to make a new palette because I don't want to write over that other one. I want to call this color palette 401. I might have to shorten these to 401 TCX. That's what's different about it. So now I want to, did it save that? Well, it didn't seem to want to save it. Let's add it to the palette first. So I'm going to add the swatch. Let me try that again. The original color was 7651. And I want to convert my coded, so make sure you're working here. And then I'm going to say cross-reference. And I want the TCX, which is already selected, but in case you forgot to do that, it has a tiny little hidden scroll bar here. It's white, so you can barely see it, but those are all the other Pantone books. But this is the most common, is the TCX, as far as in addition to the original one. Now I've already added it to my swatches, so I'm trying to add it to a new palette here. So add to palette. There we go. There was something quirky going on. Let's just call this 401 TCX and save it. Okay. Now let me try adding color palette. It was acting a little buggy. See, it's not letting me do it. So I'm just gonna go with the short name. Okay, so now I have to just go through and do all the other numbers. So I'm just going to do the same process. Okay, so now I've added all my colors. I've cross-referenced all my original coded colors to the best matches with the TCX system. So I just want to double check myself that I have all my colors. So I've got the dark, the 3 pinks, the orange, and then the ivory. And then I've got also need to make sure they're here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, perfect. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I can put this away. And I'm going to go to my TCX system palette. And then I'm going to, using the direct selection tool, I'm going to go in and add the actual color swatches. Unfortunately, they're in order, which is always very helpful. Now I need to change all my numbers to match up with that. So it's a little tedious task, but it has to be done. 2820 TCX. So this is 17, 20, 6, 24. Okay, I've manually input all my numbers, but I'm going to go back and double check myself. It's very important because one number off can just mess up a whole project. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now if I needed to, let's just make sure, do I have the right colors in? Yes, I do. Okay, so let me just double check that. Versus the other ones in the first row have the coded. So I've got my palette. Okay, so now what I can do is save this. And then in the future, if I need an uncoded, I've got it already set up, or if I need a TPX, but everything for palette number 401 is going to be on this sheet. So I could then take this group and apply it to any of my collections. Let's go back to the Wild Rose collection C. If I wanted to, I could bring that, or needed to, I'd bring that TCX palette in. So let's just go. What I would do here is group these, group, copy, come into Wild Rose. I would go to the color palette layer, which it's already on. I would paste these, which now you can see the color, the TCX all show up in here. I would save this whole collection as the TCX version. And then I would just simply do the same thing as we did when we were coloring. I'd lock the color layer, select all, go to the edit colors, go to the advanced options, and then I would double click on each swatch, go to color swatches, and then simply replace it with the TCX version. So you would do that for the whole thing. Then you would delete the old palette, and then you'd go to this save all unused. And then this would now be properly set up for a company that prefers the other system. So that's it. I think hopefully you got something out of that, and I will provide my template as a download along with this video. Here's one of the color palettes that I selected. I first used my chip book and pulled out chips that I thought would look good together, and I mixed and matched them and tried different combinations until I came up with this one. Now I have physical chips that are sitting on my desk, taped to a piece of paper, that I'm now calling palette number 400, because I have 399 other palettes. So this is a brand new palette, and I've used it for this new collection that I designed, Wild Rose, and it's in Pantone number 400. all using the coded system. So that's the whole collection. And you can see in my color palette, I only have the colors that I've used in this palette. This is my master color palette template. I use the Pantone Coded as my primary palette that I use in all my master artwork. And then occasionally I need uncoated if it's being printed on cotton or something like that, or matte paper. And then TCX is a different system. TCX stands for cotton and textiles and cotton, and the P stands for paper. This is a newer system that came out. It's a 6-digit system where the original one's a 3 or 4. Now, this is the industry standard worldwide. This has only come into play more recently, and only maybe 10 to 20% of the factories and clients I work with request the system, but you need to know about both. So because this works well for all kinds of full color printing, I always start with coded, and it looks the best on screen. The TCX has a little more, and TBX have a little more subtle and more muted colors, and they're not apples to apples, unfortunately. So what I do to start a brand new, if you download this template, which I've provided, it already is clean. It doesn't have any excess colors in it. So what I'm doing is I'm going to open up Pantone Connect under my extensions, and then I'm going to type in the color numbers that I need. Now, you can't see the physical palette that I have on my desk, but I'm going to go ahead and put the numbers in here so it'll be easy to refer to. So this is going to be Pantone 401 coded, and then the colors I'm using: 7651, 240. Okay, so I've typed in my numbers just for easy reference. And what I'm going to do is now I have to one by one put the numbers into my search bar. It's going to bring up, I want the coded. So I want to do 2 steps. I want to, one, add it to my swatches, which you'll see here. Is positioning my windows so you can see everything. So I'm going to say add to palette, which brings it down here. Actually, I didn't want to do that because this is an old one that I did. Remove from palette. Let's make a new palette, confirm and close. Okay, so I'm going to add to palette, which brings it into my Pantone Connect palette, but I wanted to also add to swatch, so it adds it to my actual document. So let's now, I can now apply that for my color palette in there. Okay, next I'm going to do the second color. So it has to be done very carefully. One typo and you have completely the wrong color. So I'm going to go add to palette, which brings it in here, and add to swatch, which brings it in here. And also just keeping everything in the same order. It's a little tedious, but the attention pays off. Okay, so you can certainly add all of the swatches first and then color this in, or you could, do whatever order that you feel is right. I find it's good for me. It helps me make fewer mistakes if I just fill it in as I go, because I have a real visual. And I'm going to go just call this 401C because it's the, it doesn't really like long names. So I'm going to just do by my color palette name with coded. And save. Okay, now let's say, for example, I need to provide artwork. I'm going to use this, for example, on my wildflowers. I'll go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to go to my wildflower collection. Make sure I'm on the color palette layer, which I'm currently not. Zoom in a little bit. Zoom in so so my color palette pastes close to where I want it. And then I paste, and I'm going to put this just above so I can easily relate the dark colors and the light colors and the medium colors. The reason I keep color palettes in the same sequence is that if this were to be picked up by a fabric company, they would most likely want to produce it in 2 or 3 colorways. So whatever's dark in this design is going to stay dark in the other way. Whatever's light in these designs will stay in the light palette. So it's best to create the same new color palette with approximately the same values, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is now lock my color palette layer and unlock my pattern background just to save time. There's no reason to do the backgrounds separately. So I select all, and then I go to my recolor artwork tool and go to advanced options. So all I do is go down the colors. So if the aqua's first, it doesn't come in the same sequence, but I can just check it off right easy here if I just stick with the same numbers. So 331 is going to become 162. The aqua here is going to become the 1635. The medium blue is going to be the 231. The darkest blue is going to change to that darkest fuchsia. The light blue is right here, so that's going to be the light pink. And then another ultramarine, which is the darker one here. And then the lightest color. And sometimes I do it by light to dark or dark to light or whatever order works for you. Now double check it. Sometimes I might change a color, miss one color, or it didn't, went a little too fast and it didn't take. So I'm going to now lock these layers again, go to color palette. Now I want to clean out the old colors out of my color palette, which you do by doing select all unused, but because this color palette's still in here, it's not letting me delete these colors. So I actually need to delete this other color palette. And while we're here, we'll put this in the correct spot, which is 0 and -3. And then I'm going to go here to the select all unused colors and delete. So now I have a nice clean color palette for this colorway, and I have 2 different files for the rose. Oh, I didn't save it. Let's go save as. I hope I didn't recolor the other one. You should always recolor immediately. Okay. So 401, yes, I did this earlier, so I'm replacing the old one. So let me just make sure I didn't write over my blue one. Okay, blue one's good. So I've got I have, here we go. So I have my original palette. I have the Wild Rose collection for that. And then I have my new palette, which isn't open. Let's open that one. Okay, so then what I can do is I can also save this as an ASE file. Because I only use these occasionally, I want my ASE file to be the coded only. So I'm going to do it from here. I'm going to do it from here. Okay, so this project only has 401C in it. So I'm going to say here to save the swatch library, and it automatically goes to the correct folder. So I'm going to call this 401. I'm going to call this 401C. But I don't want it to be Wild Rose. I want it to be the color palette 401. So now when I open up a new document, I'll just go with the 10 by 10. And of course, it comes in with all the default colors, which I want to immediately delete. I don't want any of those default colors. Select all unused. Trash can, yes. Even this little gray folder, I don't need that. Okay, so now what I can do is go to Window, Swatch Libraries, User Define, and I can go to my color palette 401C, which I just made. And it's going to bring in just my colors. And whether you're in the swatch view or the list view, whichever you prefer, you just go, because this is the ASIE file, so you don't want to alter that. You just say add to swatches, and everything that you've selected will come into your new document. The other way you can do that is you can also, let's just delete those for comparison. That's one way to do it. And then the other way is to bring your, bring the palette that you want into the document. Copy, and then Untitled, and then we're just going to paste, and it automatically brings the colors in. And then I put this above my artboard, always in the same spot. And I have all my colors in this new document. So either way is fine, whichever you prefer. And then I can save this as a new project name. Okay, so the other thing that you can do with Pantone Connect is, let's go back to Pantone Connect. And this time we're going to go to our go to our palettes. And then with the Pantone 401c, you can share it with somebody, like email it to a client. You can, there's a bunch of other kind of color information, luminous, colorblind, gradient. This I find pretty interesting to see what color combos are going to work best with this palette if I want to switch things around or use it on a different project. And then what I use frequently is download this as an image. So we have, it gives you 5 choices of formats. I prefer either the equal bars or the swatches that look just like the Pantone chips. I think putting it sideways makes it harder to read, and there's already enough, it's already difficult enough to keep track of all these numbers. And then the fan, the overlapping is a nice idea, but it just dominates with this color. So I like the equal distribution. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one that I want, and it brings up this preview, and then I export, and then I can call this color palette 401c, and I either choose a PNG or a JPEG. I like JPEG. And then I'm replacing it because I already had one. And then the way that I use that is, for example, on a fashion collection. So here's an example of a presentation to a client. So I've got a mock-up with the artwork and some information about the size and what reference to the model number. I've got the front and back, and then they requested Pantone colors in the TCX system. So my artwork has the correct artwork Pantone numbers applied, and then I go use this as for presentation only. So what happens is, let's just go to our new demo for a minute, and it has all the Pantone numbers in there, right? Let me just go to a new document to show you what I mean. I'm just going to open up a new document and then get rid of all the unused colors. Trash can. Then I'm going to take that color palette JPEG that I just did, and I'm going to bring it into this document. But see, it doesn't bring any of the Pantone numbers in it because this is just a picture of what the palette is. So this is only, to me, it's good for your reference. It's good for client reference or instructions to the factory, but I would still need to bring in either the swatches to bring in the colors, or I would need to import them from, for here, I'd have to paste those colors in and it brings it, or bring them in from the saved library, user-defined color palette 401c. And then I could say add to swatches, and then it's in my document. Close that, and now I have my Pantone numbers that if I'm creating a coordinate or whatever, it'll already be in this document. But this doesn't bring any colors with it.